AITA for getting my brother arrested after he crossed the line with my girlfriend? Ever since Natalie, my 25-year-old girlfriend, joined the family, Brandon started behaving inappropriately, making her extremely uncomfortable with his actions. He practically pushed our mom out of the way to be the first to give Natalie a hug and held her for way too long, so much so that she physically had to step back. During dinner, he kept finding excuses to touch her arm or shoulder, told absurd jokes even though they had just met, and literally wedged himself between us multiple times to sit next to her. He completely crossed the line when he tried to feed her from his own fork while staring at her intensely. Natalie was clearly uncomfortable but stayed polite because it was our first family gathering and she did not feel confident enough to say something. All evening, Brandon told embarrassing stories from my childhood, twisting them to make me look like a pathetic loser. He even invented a story about how he had to save my high school girlfriend from my supposed emotional abuse, which never happened. Natalie knew these stories were fake because I had already told her about my teenage years. But my parents just nodded along as if Brandon was telling the absolute truth. After dinner, things got worse. Natalie offered to help clean up because she is simply very polite. I was helping my dad move boxes in the garage when I realized I had not seen Natalie for a while. I found her in the kitchen where Brandon was literally blocking the exit. He had cornered her by the sink, telling her she deserved someone more exciting than her boring and unstable older boyfriend. He was way too close to her and had his hand resting on the counter near her hip. Natalie had already asked him twice to move when I walked in. Seeing me, she looked relieved and came to stand next to me. Brandon just laughed to play it off as a joke, but I could clearly see that Natalie was shaking. Let me give you some context on the family dynamic so all of this makes more sense. Brandon and I grew up in an upper-middle-class family in a small town in Wisconsin. Our parents work in real estate and make a good living, but they always cared more about keeping up appearances than building real relationships. Brandon was born when I was 3 years old, and from the moment he arrived, he became the center of our parents' universe. Growing up, Brandon showed some truly disturbing behaviors that our parents completely ignored. At 6, he deliberately broke my video game console just because I did not let him play when he wanted to. Instead of punishing him, our parents bought him a new one that I was supposed to share. At 12, he killed my hamster by feeding it chocolate, knowing it was toxic. But our parents said it was an accident and that I should not have had a pet if I did not know how to take care of it. In high school, he started a rumor that I cheated on my girlfriend at the time, which led to our breakup. My parents said he was just being protective. This pattern continued into adulthood. Brandon still lives with our parents, works at my dad's real estate agency, and does whatever he wants. He sabotaged all my relationships with my last girlfriend before Natalie. He convinced her family that I had a gambling addiction. Completely false. Before that, he told another girlfriend that I had cheated on all my exes. Also false. When I met Natalie, I decided to do things differently. I kept our relationship a total secret for the first 3 months to protect her from Brandon's usual tactics. Natalie is honestly the best thing that ever happened to me. She is a pediatric nurse at the local hospital. We met in the hospital cafeteria while I was grabbing a coffee when visiting a coworker who had surgery. She was on her lunch break, and we started talking about how bad the hospital coffee was. After chatting a bit, we started dating and everything just felt right. Natalie knows my entire family history because I wanted her to be prepared. In fact, she was the one who encouraged me to introduce her to my family, thinking things might have changed now that we are adults. She always tries to see the best in people, which I deeply admire. I finally agreed to bring her to a family dinner last month, and that is when everything started going downhill. The real problem started a few days after the dinner. Natalie started receiving weird calls and messages from unknown numbers. At first, it was just heavy breathing on the line or dropped calls. Then the voicemails got weirder. Some mentioned specific details about her work schedule and what she was wearing that day, proving someone was watching her. At first, Natalie did not make the connection, but I recognized some of the voices as Brandon's old high school friends. That group still hangs out with him and does whatever he says. Basically, a bunch of losers. When Natalie blocked their numbers, new ones started calling. Then, Brandon's friends started showing up at the hospital, pretending to visit patients but hanging around the pediatric ward where Natalie works. They stared at her for hours, making comments loud enough for her to hear. Last week, One of them followed her to her car after her night shift. She was so terrified that she called me crying from her car. I had to drive over to pick her up and escort her home, while a friend drove her car and made sure we were not being followed. Natalie is starting to have panic attacks before her shifts, and her coworkers have noticed something is wrong. Yesterday, I finally had enough proof to confront Brandon directly. I had the voice recordings, screenshots of the messages, and security camera footage from the hospital showing his friend following Natalie. I went to our parents' house where Brandon still lives and showed him everything. He just stood there smiling, then looked me dead in the eye and said he did not know what I was talking about. Then he said that if Natalie was not so stuck up, people would not need to teach her a lesson. That is when I struck him right in the face in the heat of the moment. Brandon immediately started crying as if I had tried to kill him when he just had a bloody nose. Our parents came running and of course screamed at me, not Brandon. They did not even look at the evidence I was trying to show them. Mom was hysterical that her baby was attacked, while Dad yelled that I had always been jealous of Brandon and needed a shrink for my anger issues. When I tried to explain the harassment, Mom flat out said that Natalie must have flirted with Brandon during dinner and was now pretending to be a victim because she got caught. Dad told me to leave the house and not come back until I apologized to Brandon and came back to my senses. I am writing this from Natalie's apartment where I have been since last night. She just fell asleep in the other room after crying for hours because she is scared to go to work tomorrow. Her manager has been understanding so far, but Natalie is worried about losing her job if this continues. She loves working with kids in pediatrics and should not have to give that up because of my troubled brother. I do not know what to do anymore. Every time I think Brandon cannot sink any lower, he proves me wrong. Our parents continue to enable his behavior. The police will not do anything without concrete proof directly linking Brandon to the harassment. Natalie is living in fear. Her job is at risk, and my family is acting like we are the troublemakers. Edit. I know reporting his friends, which we will do, might help the police finally take action against my brother. But that bunch of idiots is probably too scared of him to speak up. Update 1. I want to thank you for all the comments and advice you shared. Natalie and I tried to follow many of your suggestions, notably documenting all the facts and taking legal action. But despite that, the situation has only gotten worse over the past 2 weeks. We followed the advice to go to the police. Natalie and I spent hours gathering evidence, screenshots of the threatening messages, voice message recordings, and hospital surveillance footage showing Brandon's friends lurking around. We also had written statements from 3 of Natalie's co-workers who witnessed the harassment. At first, the officer we spoke to seemed concerned, especially about the workplace harassment. But then things got complicated. It turned out that Brandon's best friend, Kyle, one of Natalie's main harassers, is the son of a local police sergeant. When we mentioned Kyle's last name, the officer's attitude completely changed. He started suggesting that maybe Natalie was misinterpreting the guy's friendly attention and that they might have legitimate reasons to be at the hospital. He even had the nerve to ask if Natalie had not encouraged their attention in some way. We asked to speak to another officer, preferably a woman, but they gave us excuses. Ultimately, they said they would issue a warning to the people identified in the videos, but could not do more without concrete proof of real threats. It was a total waste of time. My parents' reaction was even worse than I imagined. The day after our visit to the police, Brandon showed up at my parents' house with a black eye, claiming I had attacked him again. I had not even seen him since the night I struck him. And yes, my parents believed him immediately. My mom called me, hysterical and crying, saying I was out of control and that my violence, especially toward Brandon, had to stop. She said that going to the police proved I was trying to ruin his future over a simple misunderstanding. Then my dad called me, furious. He told me I could no longer count on them for anything, whether it was money or a job in the family business. Fortunately, I have a good job in my own apartment, but it just shows how he does not even see me as a separate person, just as an extension of Brandon's life. The real disaster happened last weekend. My mom had promised that Brandon would apologize for everything, to both me and Natalie. She said he had spoken to her about his boundaries and understood he had been inappropriate. That was new, if only it had been true. After talking it over, Natalie and I agreed to give them a chance to make amends, mainly because Natalie really wanted to. It was a huge mistake. We arrived at my parents' house for what was supposed to be a family dinner to ease the tension. As soon as we walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. The house was full of people. My parents, Brandon, our aunt, and uncle who always take Brandon's side. And the worst part, Kyle and two of the guys who had been harassing Natalie at work. My mom called it a family intervention. For 2 hours, they took turns attacking Natalie's character while Brandon sat there, visibly thrilled by the scene. My mom started with a long monologue about how Natalie was obviously attracted to Brandon's good looks and success, and that she had flirted with him at that infamous dinner. She said Natalie was making up all this harassment because she felt guilty for sending mixed signals and was now trying to cover her tracks. The aunt added that Natalie was probably used to getting attention from men at work and had misinterpreted friendly behavior as harassment out of guilt. Brandon played his part perfectly, pretending to be sad and confused that Natalie could invent such horrible lies about him. He kept repeating that he had been so happy to finally have a sister-in-law and was devastated that she was trying to turn me against him. Kyle and his friends backed him up, swearing they had only gone to the hospital to visit Kyle's sick grandmother, who apparently changes floors every day. The worst part was when they started questioning Natalie's mental stability. They brought up her night shifts, suggesting sleep deprivation might be making her paranoid. They talked about the stress of working with sick kids, insinuating she was projecting her work anxiety onto imaginary harassment. My mom even had the audacity to recommend a therapist who could help her. Natalie initially tried to defend herself, calmly explaining the harassment and showing the messages and voicemails once again. But they interrupted her, downplayed the evidence as simple misunderstandings, or insinuated she had brought it all on herself. When Kyle started describing in detail what Natalie was wearing on certain days at work, clear proof that he was following her, my parents acted like it proved Natalie was seeking attention. The moment became unbearable when they invited Kyle and his friends to join us for dessert, claiming they wanted to show us what good guys they were. Natalie started having trouble breathing and had to leave the room. When I tried to follow her, my mom grabbed my arm and told me it was time to choose between my real family and a clearly unstable girl looking to stir up trouble. I chose Natalie. We left immediately, and I have not spoken to my family since that night. Brandon's friends have become even bolder in their harassment, now spreading rumors at Natalie's workplace that she is mentally unstable and has a history of false accusations. Her supervisor called her in yesterday to discuss concerns about the workplace drama. Although he seemed understanding, he warned that this situation was starting to affect her job performance and suggested she consider transferring to another department or even another hospital. We hired a lawyer who is helping us get orders of protection, but it is a slow process. Natalie has started looking for jobs at other hospitals, and a former coworker offered to help her land a position, but in a city about 200 miles away. I hate that we are forced into such extreme measures, but I cannot stand seeing Natalie so scared and stressed all the time. She cries before every shift and has lost weight because she is too anxious to eat. I do not know what to do anymore. Every attempt to handle this reasonably has failed. My family is completely unhinged. The police are useless, and I feel like Brandon is winning. Update 2. I wish I could give better news, but everything fell apart after what happened at my cousin Jenna's wedding last weekend. I waited a few days before sitting down to write this update. The only positive thing in this nightmare is that it ended with Brandon in handcuffs and our family permanently shattered. A little context. Jenna has always been the only family member, besides my grandpa, who did not believe Brandon's lies. When we were kids, she caught Brandon torturing her cat and told on him. But my parents convinced everyone she was lying for attention. Jenna never forgot, and she has always supported me in this situation with Natalie. She even wrote a detailed statement for our lawyer about Brandon's disturbing behavior. When Jenna sent us the invitation to her wedding, Natalie and I were hesitant to attend. But Jenna personally called us and promised she only invited Brandon because her parents forced her to, and that she had hired extra security guards specifically to keep an eye on him. She also seated us at a table with her husband's family, far away from my parents and Brandon. We thought that with all the witnesses and security present, Brandon would not dare do anything stupid. The ceremony went mostly well. At the reception, everything seemed fine at first. Brandon sat at the family table with our parents, and we were on the other side of the room with Jenna's in-laws. For the first time in weeks, Natalie was starting to relax and enjoy the evening. Around 9 o'clock that evening, Natalie went to the restroom. She had been gone for about 10 minutes when I noticed Brandon was no longer at his table. Something felt off, so I went to look for Natalie. As I approached the restrooms, I heard Natalie scream. I started running, and that is when Jenna's husband, Derek, and his brother appeared from around the corner of the hallway, right in front of me. They found Brandon had cornered Natalie against the wall in the hallway outside the restrooms and was being physically aggressive with her as she struggled to get away. Derek and his brother immediately pulled him off her. Just as I arrived, Natalie was shaking, crying, her dress was torn at the shoulder, and she had visible marks on her arms. Brandon was clearly intoxicated and started yelling that Natalie had been provoking him all night, even though she had not even gone near him. Derek's brother, who is a police officer in another city, immediately called the local police while Derek took Natalie to a private room where he and his mom tried to calm her down. And then, things got even worse. When the police arrived, my parents tried to stop Brandon's arrest. My mom was screaming that it was a misunderstanding and that Natalie must have provoked Brandon. My dad even tried to physically block the officers from putting Brandon in handcuffs, claiming this needed to be settled within the family. The officers told him they could handcuff him too if he kept it up. Brandon went from whining about how Natalie had seduced him to shouting threats, saying nobody understood what he was capable of. He looked completely deranged. While they were putting him in the police car, he started screaming that Natalie was someone who had been hitting on him since the day they met. Several guests filmed the entire scene on their phones. The fallout has been brutal. My parents went crazy, calling the whole family to tell their side of the story. According to them, Natalie lured Brandon to a secluded spot, made advances at him, and then cried foul when he rejected her. They claim she orchestrated the whole thing to get back at Brandon for exposing her lies about the harassment. They even claim Derek and his brother beat Brandon up before the police arrived, which is false, and that Natalie gave herself the bruises. The only silver lining is that Jenna's wedding videographer caught Brandon following Natalie to the restrooms. Between that video, Natalie's visible injuries, the numerous witnesses, and the videos of Brandon's arrest, our lawyer has plenty of material to build a solid case. Several family members at the wedding testified about Brandon's behavior during the evening, his vulgar remarks toward Natalie, and how he followed her everywhere during the reception. Now, my parents are threatening to disown me if Natalie does not drop the charges. They even showed up at my apartment yesterday, causing such a scene that my neighbors called the police. My mom was crying, saying I was sending her baby to prison, while my dad threatened to make sure I never find a job in this state again. Natalie and I have already made our decision. She accepted the job offer at the hospital 200 miles away, and I worked out an arrangement to work remotely for my company. We are moving at the end of next month. Some might say we are running away, but we simply need to get away from all this toxicity and start over elsewhere. Jenna completely understands and promised to keep us updated on everything going on in the family. The hardest part of this whole story is knowing that my family will never admit Brandon needs help, even after seeing him cause a serious physical incident at a wedding in front of witnesses. They continue to defend him and blame the victim. I often wonder if things would have been different if someone had intervened when we were kids, but I guess we will never know. Update 3. I was not planning on doing another update, but something happened yesterday that I need to share. After 4 years of total silence from my family, I received a hysterical phone call from my mom. But first, a quick update on Natalie and me. We got married 2 years ago in a small ceremony with Jenna's family and Natalie's close friends. We bought a house in our new city, and Natalie is now head pediatric nurse at her hospital. I still work remotely for the same company and got promoted last year. We are expecting our first baby girl in 3 months. Life was peaceful and happy, which makes what I am about to say even more disturbing. Yesterday afternoon, I was in a meeting when my phone kept ringing with calls from my mom. I normally ignore unknown numbers since my family tends to change phones to try and contact us, but this time, she left a voicemail. It turns out Brandon got married last year to a woman named Megan. None of us knew because we have had no contact with that side of the family since the wedding incident. Apparently, Brandon met Megan at church, and their families organized the wedding quickly. My mom kept going on about how perfect everything seemed, that Brandon had finally found a good Christian girl who understood him, and how happy everyone was until last week. Last Thursday, a co-worker of Megan's called the police after Megan did not show up for work for 3 days. When the officers did a wellness check, they found Megan seriously injured from domestic abuse. She had broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and extensive bruising all over her body. But here's the part that really shocked me. During the investigation, the police discovered that my dad had been helping Brandon cover up the abuse for months. Megan finally broke down and told the police everything. Brandon began abusing her physically just 2 months after the wedding. Every time she threatened to leave or tell someone, my dad would step in, using his real estate connections to pressure Megan's family about their mortgage or threatening to get her fired from her job by a friend of his. He even convinced Megan's parents that she was mentally unstable and making up stories about Brandon, using the exact same tactics they had used against Natalie. The final incident happened because Megan got a promotion at work that would have given her financial independence. Brandon completely lost control and hurt her so badly she could not go back to work. When she called my dad for help, he just told her to put some ice on it and remember her wedding vows. That is when Megan's coworker stepped in and called the police. Brandon and my dad were both arrested. Brandon for aggravated domestic violence, and my dad for witness intimidation and conspiracy. My mom wanted me to come back and fix things. According to her, Brandon and Dad needed my support, and Megan was obviously exaggerating, just like Natalie supposedly did. I blew up. I called her and told her exactly what I thought, that this entire situation was their fault. My mom broke down, saying she now realized they should have acted sooner. She admitted that she and my dad always knew Brandon had issues, but thought they were protecting him by covering everything up. Too late. I hung up and blocked her new number. Jenna then called me to give me more details. The police are also investigating other potential victims because several of Brandon's ex-girlfriends have started coming forward with similar stories of abuse and harassment. Natalie suggested we reach out to Megan through Jenna to offer our support if she needs it, which we will probably do. Natalie told me she was lucky to have support against Brandon and that Megan might need someone who understands what she is going through. Some people might think I am being hard on my mom, but I have learned that by tolerating toxic behavior, you end up creating more victims. My family had countless opportunities to change and chose not to. Now, they will have to face the consequences of their choices without my help. My priority now is protecting my own family, my wife, and our unborn daughter. Update 4. A lot of you have messaged me asking for news about Brandon, my dad, and Megan. So here's what happened over the last 6 months. First, the good news on our end. Natalie and I welcomed our daughter Grace 3 months ago. She is perfectly healthy and absolutely gorgeous, even though I know every dad says that about his daughter. Jenna and her husband came down last month to meet Grace. Now, the news regarding Brandon and my dad's trial. Jenna keeps us informed since she is still in touch with the rest of the family. Brandon took a plea deal last month. He is currently serving an 8-year prison sentence for aggravated domestic violence, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. My dad's case is still ongoing, but his lawyers are apparently trying to negotiate a plea deal as well. His real estate license was suspended during the investigation, and most of his business partners cut ties with him. The most surprising development involves my mom. After our last phone call, she finally started therapy. According to Jenna, she moved out of the family home and filed for divorce. Last week, she sent me a 12-page letter apologizing for everything, for enabling Brandon's behavior his whole life, for not protecting me when I was a kid, and especially for the way they treated Natalie. I think her therapist has something to do with it. She acknowledged that through their inaction, she and my dad had contributed to creating the problems Brandon became. But it is a little late for that. That is why she will never meet Grace and why we are staying away from my family. We do not want a grandmother who might forgive her golden boy once he gets out of prison. Megan is still in contact with us via Jenna. She is doing better, living with her sister in another state, and going to therapy. She filed for divorce and is fully cooperating with the prosecutors. According to Jenna, several other women have come forward claiming to have been abused by Brandon in the past, including 2 women from his church. The police are investigating these cases too. Megan's parents have been incredibly supportive since the truth came out. They are now working with domestic violence charities to help other families recognize the signs of manipulation and abuse. The extended family is now split into 2 camps. Most of the younger cousins and relatives are on our side and Megan's side, while the older generation continues to make excuses for Brandon and my dad. Jenna's mom, my aunt, started a family therapy group for those who want to understand how it got to this point and how to prevent it from happening again with the next generation. As for Natalie and me, we are focusing on our daughter. Natalie went back to work part-time last week and was promoted to director of the pediatric department. I still work remotely, but I am thinking about starting my own business. We have built a beautiful life here with good friends and a chosen family. Update 5. I owed you at least one last update, since many were worried about what might happen to my dad and his trial. And also to answer other questions, like what happened to my brother's weird friends. The loser friends of my brother are still losers. Kyle, the worst of them, has been doing drugs for years and lives in a rundown house with other guys like him, a condemned house. His dad took early retirement after the whole Brandon thing blew up because he was one of the people covering up the group's actions. I know he tried to help his son, but Kyle often escapes from rehab centers to go back to doing drugs in those houses. The rest of the group is more or less the same, living in trailers or becoming functional alcoholics, spending their time in bars. None of them had any real prospects for the future. Megan is now officially divorced from the monster I call my brother, and she kept some of the assets Brandon owned. That included my dad's real estate business that he had previously transferred to Brandon. She sold it to a competitor and is still living with her sister based on what Natalie told me from their last conversation. My mom is also divorced and sold her share of the family business before moving to Florida. There were few people left in our hometown who supported her, no matter how much she tried to apologize or justify herself. She is now known as the mother who enabled everything. So she started a new life elsewhere. Last Christmas, she sent a card like we used to do when we were still somewhat of a family. Before, we used to take a picture together and send it to the whole family. But this year, it was just her in the picture, and she looked sad. No smile, no joy. I burned it on my grill the next time I used it. She cannot think she is entitled to a second chance simply because she apologizes after living alongside my brother and my dad for so long. My dad took a plea deal for years in prison, without the possibility of parole. But he had to sell the rest of his business to pay his lawyers, and it will be practically impossible for him to ever get a real estate agent license back. He got a good deal for himself, which is why his lawyers were so expensive. Meanwhile, my brother is still serving his sentence, but he is now facing something much worse than a simple broken nose I gave him years ago. Jenna told me he got involved in a serious altercation in prison after being recognized as the local troublemaker and for continuing to behave like he always did. He sustained significant injuries including a broken arm, fractured ribs, and a severe concussion. In prison, you cannot act like the world revolves around you, especially when you no longer have daddy or your friends' daddies to come save you. My dad has not suffered that kind of thing yet because he plays it smarter. But it is only the beginning. He just started his sentence. There is still hope that someone will put him in his place. Yeah. Comment. I've been thinking a lot about this story since I read it. Setting clear boundaries is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves and the people we love. It reminds me how much self-respect matters, even when family tries to make you feel guilty for protecting it. Being kind doesn't mean letting others walk all over you or ignoring red flags. We all have a responsibility to choose better for our own peace. Sometimes healing means creating distance so we can breathe again. I hope this encourages you to reflect on your own relationships and what truly serves your well-being. You deserve to surround yourself with people who lift you up instead of tearing you down. Choosing peace isn't running away, it's choosing yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear what this story made you think about. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.